Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. M Samland is back again. Thank you, Jamie, for coming back.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You are such a wonderful author, and I love that your work is so diverse and eclectic and inclusive. And I'm just super thrilled that we get to showcase everything your imagination comes up with.
Thank you.
Super fun. Today, for today's episode, there is a listener advisory for mature situations. So if you have tiny ears within listening distance, you might want to preview this episode before you invite the little ones to listen in. Today's book is Arcanym, which is an LBGTQ. See, I have a hard time with that.
Alphabet Mafia.
Yeah, it's but it's fantasy. So it's a super inclusive story and it's fantasy, so super accessible. And I invite everybody to discover this story along with me. I have not read it yet, and I'm looking forward to hearing the preview today. Um, for those of you who have not met Jamie, he is a fantasy author based in Canton, Michigan. He is passionate about creating vivid worlds and compelling characters that transport readers to new realms of imagination. Drawing inspiration from his love of storytelling, Jamie spends his free time playing board games, role playing with friends, and indulging in other hobbies like martial arts and home repair. When he is not writing, Jamie often is found lost in thought, dreaming up new and exciting stories to share with readers alongside his husband and their cats. And just for the record, because everybody accuses me of ignoring the cats too much, tell us your cats' names.
Okay, Isabel's the eldest. She's our old queen. Sheldon is orange. That's his whole personality. Wolfgang is Russian blue. He's the whiny little tiny baby. And then Cabot is the youngest, and he's a flame point Siamese, and he's insane, but he's a sweet little lovey
How wonderful.
boy.
Okay. Tonight's story, give me a little bit of the backstory setup for this book.
Yeah. So Arcanum is I don't really even remember how I first got the ideas for it, but it was it was the story that I would have wanted to read like through high school. So it stars Elvan Galmoth, who is just kind of a loner. He's doesn't really like people. He's always lived this very he lives out in the country. He's never had to deal with large groups of people, so he doesn't know how to deal with people in a lot of ways. And he's also never really experienced any kind of chance for intimacy. So this book is kind of very early on, it's thrown at him, and he doesn't know what to do with it, and he's completely lost in it and rejects it, and has to kind of allow himself the chance to feel something for someone else. So his whole family is just messed up in so many different ways. His father was just kind of disappeared. He was a drunk and then just disappeared one day. His mother, which we'll see here in the prologue, was exiled a couple years ago. His sister was married off to a prince right before the mother was exiled, so she's off doing her own thing. And then the son is a monk, or I'm sorry, his brother is a monk. So they're
That's
all
an
off doing their own.
that's an eclectic family mix right
Oh yeah,
there.
oh yeah, yeah,
What fun. What a great stage to build a story on
yeah.
with all those different voices coming together. That's a
Yes,
really cool thing. I am super excited to hear your story. Will you please take the microphone and read aloud?
yes, yes, of course. Prologue. Selena tore the page from the notebook, ripping away any excess and folding it to a tight square. She shoved that deep into her bodice of blue silk as the banging on the front door started. She dipped her quill again and smoothed out a fresh, full sheet. By order of His Majesty, King Piers the Sixth. Come, came the strange and familiar voice, muffled through the heavy door. Open immediately. She wrote faster. The thumping continued. Selena, are you going to answer that? She looked up at the man standing in the entryway of the dining room, wearing a disheveled gray suit, his hair a mess. Go out back to the gardens, Miles. Her eyes lingered on the crystal glass of amber drink in his fist and returned to her furious writing. He walked past her while the banging and shouting continued. Miles, no! Selena watched him walk through the library to the foyer, gripping her quill tighter as with each step he took until he reached to unlock the front door. Ah, worthless godfight, she whispered, leaning back in her velvet armchair as the soldiers in red and gold shoved her paltry excuse for a husband out of the way, flooding the manor. They surrounded her, muskets cocked and raised, as she paid them no mind as she set her quill back to his inkwell among the neat stacks of manifests and invoices. The click of a steel cane on the polished tile pierced her mind, regular with the limping gait of the one who wielded it. Selena folded her hands on the desk in front of her as a man in voluminous robes strode through her front door. She pushed back on her chair and stood, smoothing out the creases of her silk dress. Inquisitor Nilranki. Selena ran her tongue over her teeth, tasting the foulness of the man's name. She sniffed, curling her nose at the miasma of tobacco and herbal remedies surrounding the Inquisitor when he stopped within an arm's reach. Lady Galmoth, he said, and reached to snatch the page from the desk beside her. His dark eyes scanned the words quickly and drifted back to meet hers, along with a predatory grin. You maintain your lies, it would seem. Selena raised her chin to look down her nose at the Inquisitor. The princess, his hand flashed across her cheeks, snapping her head to the side. She looked back at him slowly, the coppery taste of blood filling her mouth. You will keep the princess's name from your traitorous mouth, Nilranki said. Selena spat blood onto the man's face. Nilranki didn't flinch. He tucked his steel cane into the crook of his elbow and held the single sheet of her missive, tearing it in half before passing it to a soldier, who tossed it into the small fire in the hearth. He only then raised a gloved hand to wipe away the blood and spit from his cheek, flicking it to the floor. Guards, leave us. The men in gold and red exchanged hesitant glances before they retreated from the study. It's not often, I hear, that a man finds a vocation that he truly enjoys performing. Nilranki pulled the leather glove from his right hand, one finger at a time as he spoke. Rare that the vocation is one such as mine, with such a profound importance to the proper function of the crown. She won't succeed. Someone else will stop her. The king thanks you, Lady Galmoth, but your services will no longer be required. Inquisitor Nilranki shot out his right hand to touch her neck. Electricity arced through her, dropping her to her knees with a single cry. It only lasted a moment. Then he was tugging on his glove, grinning. You're one of them. She held a hand to her neck, falling backward against a chair. He tapped his cane on the floor, grinning down at her. One of what? Anything you'll say is just the ravings of a felon. He laughed, stepping back. Guards, bring the irons. Oh, my, I stopped working. Chapter 1. Surrounded by the musty smell of leather and parchment, Elvan Galmoth traced ink-stained fingers down a column of invoice numbers. The values didn't add up, not without considering at least 2 other books laid out in front of him. He brushed the feathery end of his quill across his lips and made yet another note of the discrepancies in the ledger directly in front of him. Elvan reached across the table and tugged another book from the middle of the stack, scattering those above it into a pile. He flicked across the pages to find one he'd earmarked and groaned at the numbers that matched nothing else in front of him. I have the post for you, said a small voice, breaking through Elvan's concentration. Happy for any distraction, Elvan looked up from the ledgers to see Senna enter and place a stack of papers beside him. Thank you. Setting his quill back in the inkwell, he took the daily news on top of the pile, shook it open to scan over the headlines. Another raid on an artist family is fierce. Barely a week goes by without one. I wonder how they find them all. They can only catch them in the act, Senna said, while straightening and stacking the papers and tomes enough to clear space to serve lunch. Otherwise, they're no different from the rest of us. I hope they at least find all of these people, eventually. Senna paused with a stack of loose parchment in her hands and gave Elvan a knowing look. Really, Elvan? You of all people are cheering on the Inquisitors? Elvan waved off the question or waved off the conversation, flipped through the other pages, pausing at a narrow sales ad of people selling furniture and clothing in bulk. That'll be me soon. He roughly folded the paper and tossed it back on the stacks of ledgers of data spanning decades before him. Picking up a thin stack of envelopes, he set aside the past due bills and invoice notices until he held a single red square of folded parchment with his name written in a looping hand. He tore it open and flattened the letter, letting his eyes travel first to the delicate signature at the bottom. It's from Her Royal Majesty the High Duchess. He blew out a loud breath and read the shortness of the shoulders and heart sinking with each sentence. Senna chuckled. And how is your sister? She set a bowl of cold soup and crusty bread at the head of the table. She's invited herself to visit. That'll be nice. I was visiting my mom the last time she was here. I think I've only seen her once since she moved out. If you say so. Elvan tossed the letter onto the top of Bill's and pushed back his chair to move to the head of the table. His eyes grazed over the dusty trinkets on the fireplace mantel and the dingy tint of the curtains framing the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the overgrown garden. The dining table, that only a few years ago had served a noble house, now lay covered with a mess of thick tomes, the only place in the house large enough for Elvan to spread out his work. When is she coming? Senna asked. Next week. She's not bringing her husbands, but I know she'll probably have the handmaidens trailing her. At least I doubt Princess Lorelei will come. I can't very well deny playing host, but he let the sentence hang with a sigh. Senna knew as well as he the financial state of the Galmoths. You have more books out than usually see with you, or than I usually see you with, said Senna. You have to be making some progress. Elvan snorted and paused with a hand on the chair's back. My mother was a true master of maneuvering money. I wonder if I'll ever understand her method. He reached to pick up a smaller notebook, fanned his thumb across the edge quickly, and tossed it back on the pile. Layers upon layers, so much more complicated than it should be. I still don't doubt her innocence, but I don't know, deliberately obfuscating the finances would make a lesser man wonder. Sitting in front of the cold soup, he flourished a cloth napkin over his thigh. With your determination, I'm sure you'll find the truth in it. She picked up the stacks of papers, marginally neater than the others, and walked her fingers through the pages. What are these? What's magpie ale Oh, is that how you pronounce that? They're invoices for a shop in Spheris. My mother spent a lot of steel there, but I can't trace the items she purchased. Why don't you go there and find out? Take a trip into town and this shop. A change of scenery might help you. Elvan paused halfway to his lips. You're joking, right? Senna took a half step back and folded her arms before her. You really should go. I haven't seen you leave the house in weeks. Elvan looked down at his rumpled clothes. I think it would be better to stay off the public eye for a while longer. I'm still scarred from what happened with the Council of Houses. Besides, I can't scrape together the steel coin for a carriage. I can barely find enough for your wages, and he waved at the stack of bills a few chairs away. That. Senna pulled back another step, picking at the fraying fringe of her apron. I have a bit stashed away. There should be enough. What? Senna, no. Don't be silly. I'll be fine. She looked down at the fully focus on the apron. I will not steal from the last person left me in this world just to go. He watched her fidget at the hem, not meeting his eyes. What is it? Senna took a deep breath, raising her chin, her eyes glimmering with unshed tears. The K House has reached out to me. They need a governess. See, Elvan set his spoon down and watched the reflective, distorted image of the ceiling's mural. Better K than Sirhain. Have you responded? Yes. Her single word shot through him like a nail into a lid. I'll start there the first of next month. They wanted me sooner, but I couldn't leave you on such short notice. I've been trying all this last week to find a time to tell you. I'm sorry. I held out as long as I could. There's nothing to be sorry for. We all knew this would happen eventually. Elvan looked up at the governess, the maid who faithfully served him every day for almost 2 decades, who had stuck with him through his family's darkest moments these last few years. His mother hired her when Senna was his age, and she gave her best years serving a failed house. Oh, if they want you sooner, you should go straight away. He forced a smile, even though his eyes burned. I couldn't, young master. I can't leave you alone, especially now with the Duchess coming. It's no longer your concerns. You've gone so far beyond your duties for years. I won't hold you back a single day. She focused on the apron hem again. Thank you. I'll set up a flare and get my steel. Elvan knew the carriage probably would drain the last bit of her steel in the private coffers, but Elvan's mother taught him to never refuse a gift. He stood and took her hand in one of his. Thank you, Senna. I will pay you back in more. He wanted to kiss her on the cheek, but she stepped away with a curtsy, never raising her eyes as she fled the room. He watched her leave, her tan and blue uniform disappearing around to the servant's wing. and raised his eyes to the mural overhead depicting the sovereign king and all his divine abstract glory. Elvan muttered a curse to it, belonged to the stack of ledgers spread over the dining table, and several more while he closed the binding on the book he used for his note-taking. A long piece of leather attached to the book's cover, ending in an ornate silver key. Elvan wrapped the leather twice around the book, tucking the key between the strap and cover, securing the book closed before turning to the empty dusty halls on the way back to his room. Elvan turned right where the grand staircase split and paused at the top. He glanced behind him through the dim shafts of light to the double doors at the far end of the hall, to what was his parents' bedroom. He had every right to move into that room with its wide south-facing windows that overlooked the valley and river, but it somehow felt wrong, like giving up on his parents ever returning to the house. Beside those, his sister's room was the second largest. Despite him being the eldest, she got the larger room because, as their mother said, girls need more space. Delphina would never return to live here. He scratched his head and strode into his childhood room, even living for the last 2 years with only the dwindling manor staff and soon to be completely alone. Elvan never spread out from here. Every object he acquired over his last 19 years, he kept in this relatively small space with narrow windows facing the north to never feel the sun. He crossed to the wardrobe, pulled out the chest tucked into the bottom, and dug through it to find a set of plain gray and tan traveler's garbs. Elvan held it against him before the full-length mirror and muttered a curse. It still fit. He wore roughly the same size now as when Sir Vazadon gifted him the clothes almost 3 years ago. I'll go to town, but not as Elvan. Tomorrow I'll be, a smile flickered at the edges of his lips. I'll be Tristan Griffith, wandering scholar. He clutched the clothes closer and grinned. The story of Tristan's life blossomed in his mind, the persona he would adopt to go unnoticed in the city. Tristan wasn't some disgraced noble shunned by his peers. Tristan's father, a local merchant of no particular fame, praised him. His mother died when he was young, but father didn't like to talk about it. Tristan came to Spirus in search of a rare book dealer. No, Elvan shook his head. Rare book dealers were, well, rare. Textiles, that's boring enough. Maybe this was Tristan's first time away from his small village home. But he's not a wandering scholar yet. He just aspires to be one someday. A knock at the doorframe. Elvan yelped and dropped the clothes. Senna stood at the threshold, holding a small leather sack. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I saw the response flyer from town, she said while pulling at the strings of the bag. The carriage will be here first thing in the morning, young master. She crossed the room to stand near him by the mirror. Playing a bit of dress up? Elvan's cheeks burned. I think it might be easier to move around the town if no one recognizes me. You can't hide from the other houses forever. Elvan looked down at the dark pouch she pressed into his palm, feeling the weight of the coins within it. His eyes burned again. I don't know what to say, Senna. Empty-handed, she took a step back. It's been an honor to serve you all these years. This isn't goodbye forever, just for a little while. I know you're close to understanding your mother's books. If not, maybe I could get the K's financier to help. That would be the last thing he would want for a rival family to understand his mother's embezzlement and money laundering. She unclipped a ring of keys from her apron and handed those to him as well. Goodbye, Elvan. She leaned forward to kiss his cheek and was gone a heartbeat later. Elvan stood alone in his room, with a maid's savings in one hand, the keys to his manor in the other, and a set of unassuming traveler's clothes at his feet.
Thank you very much. Great reading. So tell me, who in this story is your favorite character and why?
Well, and Elvan is, I love Elvan because he is kind of a bit of a self-insert for me, like who I was at 19 if I were then also different at 19. So him, but then also there was the quick mention to Sir Vazadon. And Sir Vazadon was actually the story that started this book. I'm remembering this now, so all coming back. I had written a story, a 3,000-word short story for a local contest, and it was called Losing My Magic Sword. And it starred Sir Vazadon and his partner in crime, Elrathan Spearguard. And the two of them had just slain the Daemon Lord, and they were working their way out of the Daemon Lord's lair. But he had the magic sword that it alone contained the power to defeat the Daemon Lord. And but the sword, I won't get too much into it, but it was very PG-13 plus, the kind of thoughts the sword put into his mind as
Okay.
it's being used. So Sarvazan, the noble knight, once he gets to the end, he's like, gross, and throws the sword away. So
So it's
Sarvazan is
not
this.
Bugs Bunny's magic sword and helmet.
It is not. No, no.
Okay.
So, but then that's Sarvazan is this pillar of honor and nobility, and he ends up turning into the nanny that raises Elvan and his two siblings, alongside Senna, who we met in this chapter one. So I love Sarvazan. He doesn't have a large role in this book, but he is in there. Drace is the love interest. Drace is wonderful, but um, he's nice and mysterious, and of course very attractive. So he's got that going for him.
You always have to have
So,
one of those, right?
yeah, always got to have the why are you so hot guy.
Yeah. So is this a standalone, or do you see this as part of a future series?
It is currently a standalone. I do have thoughts for this to turn into a duology. So the first book is based completely around Elvan's point of view. So he's an unreliable narrator as well. So I think it's always fun to bring a bit of chaos with the unreliable
Yeah.
narrator. The next book I have thoughts for will be some number of years in the future. It will be Drace as the main character, essentially becoming a sky pirate. I don't know the exact details on that, but he becomes a sky pirate because there's a quick, real blink and you miss it moment of airships existing in this world.
Very fun.
So he's going to become a sky pirate. So there's this duology, which then will lead into I have another duology planned, which then I have. If you're watching this on something you could watch, I have artwork behind me that I have yet to turn into a book. So I have plans of using artwork that I commissioned years ago to be a book cover.
I think that's fabulous that you can visualize a story well enough to have an artist create art that you then grab the story out of. I think that's a fabulous process.
Yeah, the artwork that I commissioned, it was the first piece that I got from this guy. Lives in Portugal, and he was I saw this piece of art, or I saw him doing other art, and I said, "Oh, I want you to do this thing." And so it's actually two characters that wouldn't have been in this scene. So I'm going to kind of retcon the whole everything to make it work because I really love this art. He's
reverse engineering as art as your starting point. I think that's
exactly yes.
That's an incredible thing. Thank you so much, Jamie, for sharing your stories with us. And I know you have many more to come back and share with us again. So I look forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.